Hey, welcome back to HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan. Today, our guest is none other than Dan Antonelli. Dan is the owner and founder of KickCharge Creative. He is also an author of the new book. The book is called Branded, Not Blanded. And it is a phenomenal story of what his team at KickCharge does when they're doing a rebrand for your company. He is the authority when it comes to rebranding in the home services space. Thad, what was your favorite part of this episode?
Oh man, we covered a lot of things. I mean, branding is one thing. I mean, that's how we got our start in the advertising world was branding in print magazines. And so I really liked when we talked about camels and horses. And more specifically, the quote that Dan has in his book. I'm going to make sure I have it so I don't mess it up. A camel is a horse designed by a committee, and this idea of groupthink and how it can impact your brand either positively or negatively. So great topic on that, but it also kind of leads into something that Dan, you wanted to talk about, was the characteristics of HVAC owners.
Yeah, I mean, we're often asked who is the, what's sort of the blueprint or the characteristics that a home service business owner has, and the ones that you've worked with. What are the characteristics that they all share? And certainly, I would say one thing is very clear is that they are not complacent in what they're doing today, and just they believe that nothing they're doing today is actually good enough for tomorrow. So you look at our most successful brands, those are the ones run by men and women who really truly embody that idea and understand that idea, and don't believe that whatever success they've gotten to that point is the blueprint to get them to success to the next level. And so it's always admirable what they've done to that point, but they're ready to really go to the next level. And they are people who trust the experts that they've hired as well. So I think that that's something definitely that we see in common with some of our most successful clients.
Amazing. No, that was a phenomenal part of the show for sure. One of my favorites, but definitely my favorite was at the very end, when you answered the question of what is your greatest regret. It was incredibly heartwarming, humbling, and a stark reality of what it is that life is all about. And I truly loved when you got really vulnerable at that end part of the show. Now, before you watch the rest of this episode, pause this video, click the link down below, and go buy Dan's book, because it is on pre-sale today for only 99 cents. Tomorrow it's going up. So if you're watching this show on Friday or later, I'm sorry, you missed out. It's 99 cents today. Click the link, pause the video, go buy the damn book. You're not going to regret it, I promise you. But we do want to hear from you and what your favorite nuggets are from this episode. So make sure you leave a comment down below as well. Let us know what your favorite parts were, and we can't wait to see those as well. You're going to love this episode with Dan Antonelli. Cheers.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to HVAC Success Secrets Revealed, a show where we interview industry leaders and disruptors, revealing the success secrets to create and unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Now your hosts, Thaddeus and Evan.
Hey, welcome back to another HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan, where we have good conversations with good people, and any good conversation worth having is worth having drunk. Cheers, gentlemen. Dan, thank you so much for joining us, my friend.
Cheers, guys.
Nice Corona. You know what? I saw your team playing a game of Flip Cup with that the other day on social.
Yeah, yes.
And actually, that's one of the questions I got here for you today on team culture, but we'll get to that in a bit.
I think there's more alcohol in the fridge now than there is actually food.
The way that it should be.
Right? I was about to say the way that it should be. See, we work from home, so our liquor cabinets are always usually pretty stocked.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, for those of you that do not know Dan or recognize his brand, KickCharge, they are the authority and by far the most referred company in any of the Facebook groups for rebranding, logo design, vehicle wraps, creative marketing strategies within the home service space. They are absolutely crushing it. So much so that I'll put you on the spot right now. If I were to say, Dan, I need a rebrand and a new logo, when is that going to get done right now? How far out are you?
It won't happen soon. I think we're booked out about 5 months at this point.
Amazing. And
So
they're one of the most sought after companies within the home service space for any marketing service. They're absolutely crushing it by far. I feel like you are like the Kleenex to facial tissues that you are to branding and authority, in that you are the brand that people name and they go to when it comes to rebranding.
I really had to think. I really had to think about that for a minute.
Because nobody ever asked for a facial tissue. Everyone asks for a Kleenex, right?
Yeah.
People are
Okay,
not going to ask for a
even if
rebrand.
it's
They're
not
just
a
going to say, I need a
Kleenex,
KickCharge, right?
I was struggling a little bit with the blowing of the nose thing, and I just wasn't sure where you were going with it. But okay,
Like, are you calling them a booger?
I got it. I got it.
There it is. We got it now. All right. We're Canadians, so we're a little bit ahead of Americans when it comes to thinking sometimes.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. Here's the thing. Bottom line, Dan is phenomenal at what he's done. He's phenomenal at what he does. His team is incredible. And one of the reasons they are booked so far out is because of the meticulous detail that Dan puts into training his team to getting them to the point of being able to create the amazing designs that they do. They do phenomenal work. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation, especially about his new book, which is coming out on pre-sale tomorrow, which is super exciting. Branded, not blanded. Dan, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure. Super excited to talk to you guys today. My favorite topic.
A topic you can't get enough of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The first question I do have for you actually has nothing to do with the book, has nothing to do with branding, and it has everything to do with you, because the last time we had you on the show, you were fresh off a heart surgery. You had just gotten back on the bike for the first time after surgery. So first question, how are you?
I'm great. I'm doing super well, very fortunate, very blessed. And just, I was riding my bike this morning actually, and just looking at the scenery and just feeling how lucky I am and how blessed I am. So great experience, which sounds strange to go through, but was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And you would say, well, of course, not dying is probably one of the best things to not happen to you. So that part was cool. But it certainly, really helped me try to figure out my legacy, try to figure out really what I wanted to sort of leave behind as my legacy. Certainly the book came out a bit because of that experience. It was something that I have been wanting to do for a number of years. Probably about 4 years is when I started getting the itch again. Like, I previously wrote a book in 2013 called Building a Big Small Business Brand. And, you write the book at the time and that contains almost everything up until that point. And I'm like, well, I'm like 6 or 7 years out from that book. And there's a lot of stuff I learned. There's a lot of things that we do differently a little bit, not a lot different, but there are things that we do differently than what we were doing, let's say 10 years ago or so. And so I thought, so much that you see on the Facebook groups, like, certainly when people post like an image or a truck or a logo and they're asking for feedback and you don't, people don't really understand like how this is supposed to work. So I just thought, if I can really get this, book out there, it can be really useful for a home service owner, so like, even if you can't use us, and not everyone can, and I obviously respect that and understand that, but at least you'll know what you're looking to do and how to do it and how to build a brand and what are the aspects that are most critical. And so, like, you think about legacy and you think about what is the leave behind. And of course, I've got legacy with, 1,000 or so clients that we've been able to build a brand with. Right. So those people, that's part of my legacy too. That's part of, my fingerprints are basically ingrained in their DNA. And certainly that part is cool. But if it can help an owner, not make mistakes. And I think that's the other part too. I think there's a lot of bad information about how this works, a lot of bad strategies that are recommended, even recommended by people who to me should know better. And so there's different things that are spoken about like a playbook on how to do it. And you're just like, I've had to fix a lot of those mistakes. And so I was like, you know what? Obviously got my health back in check and got those things working. And then it was last October that I was flying out to speak at an event with Joe Crisara. And I literally wrote the outline on the flight out there. And then on the flight back, I started, bullet pointing the sections of each chapter. And then it just became a question of dedicating time to, basically, chopping away at it. And that's kind of the only way you can write a book is to really kind of chop away at it a little bit at a time. And I knew I had Victor's event coming up next month. Well, almost next month in October 21st in Vegas. And I said, I want this book done for that event. I want to be able to hand this book out at that event. And having that goal certainly was something that, you start realizing, June, July, you're like, oh man, I'm kind of running out of time here. Like I got to really get this thing going. But almost like not having that sort of hard stop, maybe it drags on a little bit longer. But I literally wrote 90% of this book after probably 10:30 at night. And,
right.
I couldn't write it here in the office because there's just too many distractions. But I would just like sit there at night and start chipping away at it. So I would say for anyone who actually is interested in writing a book, that's kind of how you do it. Like you can't, it's like, what's that saying about eating an elephant? Like you can't bite it off in one chunk or something like that. So,
yeah. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Yeah. So I did a little bit at a time, and then you just start working through it. And I started getting really excited once I started the layout phase. And I actually laid out this entire book myself. The team here was actually too busy to lay out the book. I'm like, wait, it work for me. Like, can't we do this? They're like, no, Dan, like we're too busy. You do your own thing. So I actually had to lay out the entire book myself. And I was like, wait, I thought I was in charge of this and I could actually pull some strings, but apparently I couldn't. But then you start seeing it come together and come to life. And I reached out to so many clients whose stories I wanted to share in the book as well, because it's one thing like for me to talk about this stuff, and I have to lay the foundation of the theory behind home service branding, right? So you have to get that in there. But I really wanted people to see the stories and relate back to these owners who are just like them reading the book. Like maybe they were at one point exactly at that stage. And so, we have stories in there from Amanda Triolo from Grasshopper. We have stories from Tommy Mello, Victor Rancor. Like we have all these great people who at one time, like were just really contemplating this and trying to figure this all out. So those kind of success stories and case studies, whatever you want to call them, are really put throughout the book. And a lot of them are in specific sections because what I'm talking about in that section is very related to that specific case study.
Right.
So, a lot of good visuals, a lot of good graphics. So it's not like dense reading where like you feel like, there's a break in sort of that sort of process. And like the last few months are just really exciting because like I would share some chapters with people and just getting such great feedback. And then also even just like clients, as you're working through the process with some clients, I was like, oh man, like we're talking about naming, like, I'm going to just send you the naming chapter. Like just read the naming chapter. Like we have a whole chapter on naming your home service company. And so like I just couldn't wait to get it done. So like after all this time, like I'm just so excited that it's actually going to get out there and get released.
Totally.
And I had some advanced copies. I sent you guys a copy. You guys had a chance to review it. And just the feedback's just been really amazing. So that's good too, because like you're doing this kind of isolated for 11 months. And at the end, you're like, I hope this doesn't suck. Cause like, that'd be like really disappointing if this sucked, but
yeah.
So the feedback's been amazing. Really good reviews from people that had a chance to see the initial release version. And so that's kind of fun. But if it becomes a book that people reference, and just say, hey, before you do anything, like read this book. And no one writes a book to get rich. So I don't want anyone to think there's any chance that I'll probably recoup any of the money that I put into this book. Probably never going to happen. But I think it'll be really neat if it helps somebody to avoid
Mhm.
making, because it's expensive to do over. So that's the other aspect of it, is like, well, 3 years down the road, like if I had known this information prior, I wouldn't be needing to redo all my trucks, all my website, all my uniforms, like all those things. So like,
Everything.
yeah, everything. So it's like, if I can help somebody avoid those mistakes, it'll be so much less costly later on to have to redo it. So that's the part of it too, where I'm just like, maybe some people really will listen to what's being spoken about in the book and apply those techniques, apply those principles to their own branding, and then save them a ton of money, like down the road, and get to where they want to go faster too. And that's the other part of it too, is like, how does it affect your marketing spend, your recruitment, like all those other aspects. Like, you guys know, when you are doing the digital marketing on someone with a great brand versus someone with a shitty brand, like, how much harder your job is or how much easier your job is going to be. And we talk a lot about that in the book too, as far as how certainly brands affect ROI and the spends, and how, the better the brand, the less money you need to spend to market it.
Well, and this is something you talk about right at the beginning of the book. And I know you've quoted Roy Williams many times, and I think you're taking over his quote now and making your own, and saying the weaker the brand, the more money you will spend to market your company. Just straight to the point. And it's true, right? And Roy's quote of overpaying on advertising is the tax you pay for being unrememberable, right?
Yeah.
Or unremarkable.
Unremarkable, but yeah.
Unremarkable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that idea of a branded search versus AC repair near me, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
so much more impactful. There's a lot to unpack there in that first opening monologue.
Before we get to the unpack, because I got a few notes there too, but I did want to say, drops tomorrow. Where can they find the book? I mean, tomorrow, by the way, September 1st, in case you're listening to this later, I should preface that because we're going live with it. It's August 31st, 2022. So September 1st, where can they find it?
Yeah, so we're going to have a link, obviously, on my site, on my channels and everything, but it'll be on Amazon. And for the first 24 hours, it'll be 99 cents, and then it'll go up to $9.99 after. So obviously, if you pick it up tomorrow, it's going to be 90% cheaper than it will be the following day.
So get it tomorrow is what Dan is trying to say.
Yeah.
And it is a phenomenal read. The thing that I really loved about the book and reading through it, and you sent me the PDF copy so I could go through it before it was even printed. But the idea of how can I lay out the process of what your team goes through so that someone can do it for themselves if they don't have the money to be able to do it right now. That's really what I took from this. And it's a real gift to really give someone this process that they can walk through for themselves. And they might not get it perfect, but that's okay. They're going to be so much closer to what perfect could be than trying to do it on their own and naming it Bob's Plumbing. So phenomenal gift to the industry. I love the idea of it. I think it's going to be a fantastic hit, and it is going to make a big change. One thing you did mention was, when is the right time to rebrand? Because we've had like every guest that you or every person that you mentioned that's featured and their stories in the book, those people have all been on their show, and we've all talked about rebranding and what that process was like for them, because it is something that's important. And I know last year at Victor's event, you told the story on stage of how Victor came up to you at an event a couple of years prior and asked you to take a look at his logo at that time and what you thought of it, which do you want to tell everyone what you said, or at least what he says that you said?
Yeah, he says that I said it was fucking awful. Now, I don't really remember it that way. I'm usually not quite as blunt. I mean, you'll know that I don't like it, but I don't know that I would. He says I use that language. I may have, maybe I did. But
plead the fifth. I plead the fifth.
Yeah.
I had known him. If he was a stranger, I probably wouldn't have said it exactly like that. If I did say it, I'm not saying that I did say that. I'm still denying it. But that feedback is not often given, mainly because the people that are being asked either don't know, or, like, for example, like if you're going to buy 5 billboards, do you think that the guy that's in charge of sales for the billboard company is going to say at that point, like, dude, your logo sucks. Like, don't put this on a billboard. No, like they're not going to have that conversation. Is the truck wrap guy going to tell you, dude, like your logo sucks and I can't design a truck wrap for you? Like, no, like they're going to, that's
they want to make a sale today.
Yeah, they're going to make a sale. Exactly. So, I come from a position where I don't want to take money from someone to deliver something that I know can't meet their objectives. So, a lot of people come to us, hey, I want you to design my truck wrap. Here's my logo. And I'll be honest with them, like, I can't work with what you have, and I'm not interested in taking your money for something that isn't going to work. So you have two options at that point. Like, you can say, Dan, you're full of shit and you're an idiot and I'm just going to go somewhere else. Or you could think about that and say, well, why would he be telling me this? Like, no one else has told me this, but Dan's telling me this. I'm like, because like, I want you to win. Like, I'm not interested in cashing checks for doing things that I know aren't in your best interest. Right. And so, taking that and applying that and saying, this isn't working and you need to fix this foundation before you embark on these other endeavors. And like I said, sometimes it's really the first person to tell them that. Like, their employees aren't really going to know whether or not they have a good brand or a poor brand. Most advertisers aren't going to really push that agenda or push that issue because they're in the business of selling ad space, for example. And so, I try to be as honest with people. It's funny, and I'm not going to announce it because I'm not committed to it 100%, but I want to do a show like this to a certain extent and feature maybe 3 or 4 brands that people would submit. And I'm going to rank them in different categories. So I'm going to say, naming, I'm going to score it 1 to 10. Execution of the actual logo, 1 to 10. If it had a mascot. So I'm going to come up with criteria, and then I'm going to basically grade these logos. And I think that would be a really cool educational thing. Like, I'm not doing it because I'm trying to trash their logo. I'm doing it so that they understand what aspects of their logo are failing and not delivering brand promise. So, and again, I think people don't even like with mascots, like people don't understand what constitutes a good mascot design versus a poor one. Right. There's so many aspects of what goes into the mascots that we design. People don't realize, like, oh my God, like the stroke widths of how a mascot is comprised are super critical for that to work in an outdoor environment. So like, they don't even understand like why that's important. Like, so like educating people about that, I think would be a really interesting thing. So, I once posted on Tommy Mello's home service Facebook group page, like, hey, like
300 comments with that.
There's like 300 or 400 comments from people who like, well, here's my logo. Like, what do you think? And they didn't really know like whether it was good or not. And I would go through and critique the truck wrap and just say, hey, next time around, maybe do this or switch the order here or delete this, make this bigger. So I think there's just such, there's not a lot spoken about, not a lot of education about it. And it's not even something that even from a designer school perspective, like in educational setting, they're not talking about how to design effective vehicles as one specific medium that a designer should know how to. So I think it would be really cool to do that. Like, I was trying to figure out the logistics of how I would do it. And, do I want to open those floodgates like I did on Tommy Mello? Like, I was like, do I really want to do this? And I'm like, yeah, there won't be too many people. And then there literally was like 300.
Right. It's funny. I was thinking like, if anybody's watching this, even right now live, if they want to do this live right on the show, we can share screen it and we can go through it live. So if anybody's brave enough, be able to drop that, or if you're listening to Team Repeat and you want Dan to do that too, just drop your web in there and Dan can do that in return. Sorry to put that on you, Dan. But I think it's a phenomenal thing, right? Because I remember reading that post and I remember looking at people's comments and then you being very tactful in your responses to some of them, because some of their brands outright were atrocious and some were pretty good and they're just missing a couple marks, and then anywhere in between. So, one of the things that I'd written down was tough conversations. And when you're in that particular place, and I mean, anybody can use this in terms of any tough conversation that you might have in your life or in your business with your spouse or significant other, your team members. How do you have that sort of a tough conversation with somebody when it's their pride and joy, and they might be coming to you at a place, well, gee, I really like it, and then you're like, well, no, it fucking sucks. I mean, you're not going to say it like that. Like, how can somebody be
Sometimes you
tactful and
need
having,
to.
well, sometimes depending on the person, right? But like, how can
Yeah.
you be tactful and having that conversation without necessarily tramping all over one's feelings?
Yeah. Fortunately, most people who are coming to us already know that they need to change. So we have more of those people who already are on board with the idea. But for the people who, again, like maybe want another service from us, maybe they want collateral, maybe they want brochures and other marketing materials or a truck or something like that, they're not necessarily I won't say ready for that conversation, but they didn't come to us for that specifically. They came to us for another deliverable. And now I'm trying to tell them that I can't do that other deliverable until I fix this foundation. And so I just try to call out the aspects that are deficient. If it's a logo and, again, maybe the mascot is poorly illustrated, or it's amateurish, or it's clip art, or if you're an HVAC guy and you have sun and snowflakes, like stuff like that, I can speak to, and I could say, hey, there's probably no chance at all that anyone is going to give this a second look, because there's nothing memorable about it. There's nothing delivering brand promise about it. There's no brand story. And so, again, it's like, these are the things that are actually fundamentally wrong with your brand. And do you want to address them, or do you want to continue on your path, which is totally fine. I have complete respect if that's your decision. I just can't be a part of it. Like, I don't add any value to that. So I'm not the right person to go to if you want to continue on the same path with that poor branding. And like I said, it's totally fine. There's millions of companies do perfectly well with a poor brand. But if you are really trying to make a substantial change and are ready for the idea of a change, then we can certainly help. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I think the book will be such a great thing, because I would literally probably just say, listen, just download the book and then talk to me in a week. And then you tell me if you think you need to rebrand or not, because it's going to really speak to them directly. Like a lot of the things, even like naming, like that's one of the biggest chapters in the whole book is on naming. And there's a lot of people that are going to be kind of hurt after reading this book, because they're going to realize, hey, this is why this actually isn't working as well as it should, because I'm fighting this problem, right? And how do you overcome bad branding, like we spoke about? Is we just have to spend more money to do it. So that's the part that I hope people will really understand. Is you could say, well, the investment in rebranding is significant, and it 100% is, right? The cost to redo your trucks, to your uniform, your website, right? So the list goes on. But what's the long-term cost in missed opportunity, in recruitment issues, and all these other things that stem from that foundational aspect being poor? So, we talk about in the book about a brand being a wheel, right? And in the center of that wheel is a hub, and that hub is really like your logo. And all the touch points around that wheel are what comprise your brand. So if that hub is jacked up, you can still probably create a wheel, but it's never going to be round. And so you can push a wheel that's not round. It just takes a lot more effort. So the objective of any good branding is to develop basically a perfect wheel. So everything around that hub speaks to your brand story, is on brand, talks about your brand promise. All those aspects. And then that wheel is just going to spin so much easier and requires so much less effort. And that's the whole part of it that people just don't get.
Well, and I just quickly counted, there's 16 points that you have in your book about just on the name itself, right? And I might have missed one or two. So maybe it's even 18 points, right? But like, just before you even get to the brand promise, there's 16 questions that you have to ask yourself about the name that goes into your business. Like it's important. It's huge. Everything can stem from that, right?
It is. And again, too, like the idea of, well, do we want to change the name of everyone or every single client that approaches us? No, we don't. Like, it's a very, very big decision. It's not something that you enter into lightly. You measure brand equity, you measure history, revenue factors in, like, how much revenue. So those are all aspects that certainly we are looking at. But if you've got this anchor that you're dragging around, like, we should fix it, and we should fix it now. It's going to be even more expensive to fix it next year, in the following year.
Well, I look at somebody like Julian Heat and Air, one of our clients, Jason Julian. I'm surprised he hasn't chimed in that he's on here. Yeah, he's probably out doing some air conditioners, but that's a great example of somebody that you didn't need to change the name because the name is already known a lot in his area, but he definitely needed a rebrand because he was red and blue in flames and snowflakes, like the traditional what you see of air conditioning companies. And now you look at what his brand is, it's completely different, but it has the story of the art behind it, which is an important piece to consider. Is that sometimes the name can go a long way, but all these other elements factor into it.
Yeah. And when we have the opportunity to rename a company, for us, that's a lot of fun. I mean, because you get to ideate on a brand story from scratch. There's no baggage that I'm worried about. There's nothing that I have to carry over from the old name. And we'll probably do 40 or 50 renames this year, I would say. And I'd say we probably have done over 100 thus far. And we've never seen a net decrease in revenue subsequent to renaming. Never. It's never happened. So we definitely have the process dialed in on how to execute it properly. But people's biggest fear is that, oh my God, I'm going to lose traction and everybody knows me by this name. And if you do a better name, it'll just get traction so much faster. And then you'll just accelerate that trajectory. So it definitely becomes this catalyst for significant change. And, like I said, everyone that we've done it for, whether it's renaming or rebranding, it's always that catalyst that really, really changes the trajectory of that company in a positive way. So that's exciting for us to be a part of that story, because we look at it again as our work here, the ability to really change the lives of the people who trust us with that task. And the same with the team here, like that's why we're here. So that's kind of really, it's not a lot of industries probably or jobs where you feel like you're literally changing the life of the people who are hiring you. And that's why I do what I do. Like, that's my passion. Like, that's my why. So it's kind of cool that like 27 years later, like I'm still doing that. And I know you guys got a picture of me.
I was just going to pull it up. I was like, there it is. That's how Dan started right there.
Hand painting with not quite short shorts.
Yeah.
Sweat
So
better cut off.
I had a mullet there, I guess, too.
Yeah.
But that was
those socks are almost up to your knees.
Yeah. So that was a home service van. So that was me. I was probably 16 or 17 at the time. And, it's a lot of years later and I'm still doing that, which is really kind of cool. And I knew at the time that it was something really special that I was involved in. And, to still be a part of that today is awesome. And I think even just going back to the idea of how do you know how to design effective truck wrap? I learned the fundamentals of lettering a truck and that medium when I was 17 years old or 16 years old. And I worked under a sign painter that was the most talented individual. His name was Bert Author, still friends to this day. And he taught me how to design effective lettering on a truck. And so you would do something and you would step away from that canvas and you would be able to tell, well, did it have good legibility? Was there enough contrast? Can I read this from a distance? Like all those aspects, I literally learned by lettering a letter at a time on a truck. And you can't replicate that experience sitting in front of a computer screen. Like it's just totally different sort of realms. And so I think that's part of why a lot of the truck wraps today are like really ineffective because they didn't benefit from that experience. Like working under a master sign painter, just so skilled in that realm, and just learning so much about the craft from that perspective. And then I went to college and studied advertising. And then it was like, now I could really add to that aspect of branding because not only could I design things that were legible, clean, easy to read, but now design things that were memorable, delivered brand promise, and, help generate sales. Like, so I got really the best of both worlds. And it was kind of fortunate that like my parents didn't want me to become a sign painter, which I was kind of devastated at the time because that's all I wanted to do. Like I love, and I still love hand lettering. Like I don't get to do it often. It's been a few years since I probably picked up a brush. But if I hadn't gone to college to learn the craft of advertising, I don't know that, I get to where I am today. So I got really the best of both worlds in terms of that experience. And, again, just super blessed and fortunate for who I got. I just remember I was 16 years old and I wanted to sweep the floors of that sign company because I knew I wasn't a good enough hand letterer to get a job as a traditional sign painter, but I wanted to be around it. And I was willing to do anything to just be exposed to it. And so, I walked in the shop and he's like, paint an O and paint an S. So O's and S's are the hardest letters of the alphabet for a sign painter to actually paint. I'm going a little off topic here, but
this is great.
I did kind of a half-assed S. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. And I did an O, same thing. And he said, you know what? I can work with this. And so he took me under his wing and he taught me so much. And that was probably some of the happiest times I had. And I always joke that when I retire from here, I'm going to go back to sign painting because it's just therapeutic. I absolutely love the craft of hand lettering things. And so I don't know, that's my dream one day is just, you don't have to pay me. I'll just go to the sign shop. And as long as they're hand lettering there, I just want to be around it. So,
well, the thing about when you find something that's your passion, and like I actually like painting in rooms in houses because it's like you think about, that's not quite as artistic as painting signs. Nowhere along the stretch, but it's still painting, right? But you talk about like the therapeutic, what things can you do in your life? And this is just a bigger overall, life component of it is like, okay, find something that's you can turn your brain off, because when you're there, here's what you do. You're thinking only about your brushstrokes. You're thinking only about the sign. You're thinking only about what you're doing, and every other distraction is irrelevant to you. And that's why it can be therapeutic. Some people are like, well, how is painting a sign therapeutic? Well, you've eliminated everything. That's your innate focus and what you're thinking on. So, Evan, did you have a thought before I segue into my next note there?
Yeah. A reoccurring theme that your biggest letdowns seem to be your greatest gifts. Having your parents tell you have to go to school and end up being the catalyst as to what is launched into KickCharge today. The heart surgery and having to go through that, and that being such a great gift in terms of the amount of gratitude and appreciation you have for life now. Like it's pretty cool.
And it's hard sometimes too, because people, I think I've learned to look at any hardship and any challenge like that and look at it as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And, that's just a mindset focus. That's just changing your mindset about what's being presented to you. So even some of the things that have happened that have been, significant challenges in running this agency, like to me, they're the best things that ever happened. Like I'm so grateful that I went through maybe a really bad experience because I arrived on the other side of that in a much stronger position. So at the time you're like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but I'm learning so much from this and I'm just going to apply it moving forward. And, like Amanda's saying is,
forward is a way
of life, so that whole idea is you're constantly moving forward from that. And, there's no sense in looking backwards except just to learn from those experiences. So, a lot of things, came into play and I feel again, just fortunate that, I'm still doing those things that I was passionate about 35 years later or something like that. So it's pretty wild. It still blows my mind sometimes. I still get the rush, when I see, a wrap that we designed, in person, or it's driving down the road. I still get that same feeling that I had when I was 15 years old and I saw a sign that I did or a truck that I lettered and I'd point to it and I'd say, I did that, so there's still a really cool aspect of that I'm blessed that I still am doing, and that's kind of cool. And I think it's also, for the people that are struggling to try to find their why, I think I was so blessed to learn early on what I wanted to do, so I was like, I probably got brushes and lettering enamel when I was 14 under the Christmas tree, so how weird is that your Christmas gift is a lettering brush and a can of paint and a book on how to letter signs, how to paint signs. And that to me, like I was the weird kid that, you know, my friends were going out sort of, I don't want to say partying, but they would go out after high school and I was coming back and I was lettering alphabets. Like
Right.
that's what I was doing. I was sitting in my backyard lettering alphabets, and then I would paint over it and I would letter another alphabet until I felt like I was getting good at it, because sign painting is not something that you become proficient at very quickly. Like it takes a lot of practice. But that was, you know, that was my passion. Like I didn't mind coming home lettering alphabets. Like even when I went to college, Bert, the sign painter, he literally gave me an alphabet that was a script, and it was above my desk. And I would sit there and just do his script alphabets. Like, so I was working on my scripts. Like, so to know that early on is a really blessing. Like, I feel bad for some of the younger generation that, you know, they're going through college and they still don't know what they want to do. They don't have like a passion yet.
Don't get us started on the college debate.
Right.
Yeah. So
I was
just
going to make a gender studies.
at that point to
myself.
really have an idea of
Right.
what I wanted to do. So,
Well, and it's interesting because Tony Robbins talks about this at his events where, you know, when he was a kid, he wanted to be a rock star. And yeah, he's not a rock star today, but that feeling that you get that he was attaching to being a rock star, that's what he's living today through his events and everything that he does. But oftentimes it's not the actual thing that you were as a kid that you were dreaming of. It was the feeling that you were searching for through that thing that you can then lead to a future passion, right? For me, it's people. Like I just love connecting with people. I love doing the podcast and I love being center stage. Like those are the two things for me. I was a quarterback. I wanted to be a quarterback when I grew up. I used to be when I was a little bit younger now, but that idea of having everything weighing on me, being the one that everyone relies on and being center stage, that's what it was for me. I get to do that now. And seeing people light up from our work, you know, being able to create a website for someone and watch their face light up when they see that reveal. Like talking to a business owner that's had their biggest year ever. You know, I was just looking at one of our clients' stats, and he's up, you know, almost, I think he's 104% over last year. Like that's phenomenal. It just feels so amazing to give that gift. And on top of that, he's increased his profitability by 18%. So it's incredible to see that impact on.
And that's what I love about
businesses.
the trade shows. Like when I get to speak at the trade shows and then I get to interact with the clients and see them, you know, that aspect of it is just so rewarding and gratifying for sure.
Right.
That, you know, they tell you how much that your work has impacted their lives. And I can't think of a better affirmation of your why than that. So
totally. Dad, did you have a comment there too, bud? I cut you off.
No, I was waiting for you guys to finish up before I did the segue. So,
All right, go for it.
So before we get into camels and horses, I do want to get into the random question generator, because this is one of my favorite parts of the show. It's a random question that has nothing to do with the show whatsoever. But I think we've morphed since you've last came on, and we actually give you 3 choices. You don't get to know what the choices are beforehand, but we have 3 questions queued up. So do you want question 1, 2, or 3?
2.
2. All right. What song would you sing for your American Idol audition?
I'm a Rush fan, so you Canadians can appreciate
Closer to the Heart. It's a good song.
It wouldn't be a very good rendition, but I don't know, maybe Tom Sawyer.
Love it.
Oh. Rush is a good band. I used to be able to play one of their songs on the guitar the third time I learned in my life. I've learned guitar a couple times in my life because I practice it and then I stopped playing it, and then you got to relearn it all over again. But it's
What
like
song
that.
did you play? Which song?
Closer to the Heart was one of the Rush songs. But you talk but it's funny because you talk like practice and passion, right? When you find your passion and you practice it those 10,000 hours, you get really innately good at it. I'm not saying that I'm good at guitar. I'm just kind of using that as the thing is when you stop doing something that you practice that's when you become bad at it. So, but Rush, good choice. Evan, what about you? What would be your song that you'd sing at your American Idol audition or Canadian Idol for us?
probably my favorite karaoke song, and that is Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on.
So one of the things, so we're at the point now, and in the conversation, somebody has went through the rebrand process. They've potentially got a new name, they've got a new wrap, and they're ready to say, all right, I want to have people critique my brand before I go live with it. Whether that's their friends, their families, their employees, Facebook group. And one of the quotes in your book that you have is, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Mm-hmm. So walk us through, I guess, that quote and how groupthink can be bad for a rebrand.
So a lot of times the context is missing from that particular question. So if you present a logo to someone as like, hey, I'm thinking about rebranding and this is what they're saying I should do, or this is an idea that they have, you're only sort of reading chapter 1 of that book. Okay. And you don't really know what the rest of the story is supposed to be or sound like, or even look like. So that part is sort of not really fair in that regards, because you're asking someone to judge something that they haven't seen the full implementation of. So it's very difficult for people to really understand how this new brand will live and breathe in these other environments, how it will function, how it will tell the brand story, even how it will deliver brand promise. And a lot of times too, the instinct is to go with something that feels very natural, right? So sometimes we get comments like, this doesn't look like a heating and air conditioning company, as if that's a bad thing. And so we don't really want it to look like a heating and air conditioning company, because that's what everyone else is doing. So I can't build something that's memorable that looks just like what everyone else is doing. That's the opposite of being memorable. That's like the purple cow, so, and if I'm seeing black and white cows forever, I don't see any of them anymore because they just blend into the countryside. But what if there was a purple one suddenly? You'd stop and you're like, well, what the hell was that? So that's the part too, where a lot of times people want to result or revert, I should say, back to that safe space. And the safe space is doing what everyone else is doing currently. So, oh yeah, it doesn't have red and blue arrows. Well, yeah, that's because everyone else has red and blue arrows. And I don't want it to look like that. So some of our most successful brands, believe it or not, were almost universally bashed by everyone that the owner shared it with. And they were like freaked out about that, of course. Like they were like, oh my God, like everyone tells me this is an awful idea. Like, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And we have to talk them off that ledge. We have to explain the vision. We have to have them understand what it is that we're trying to do. And I don't expect everyone else outside of those conversations to really understand that at that point. So that takes guts. It especially takes guts to sort of zig when everyone else is zagging. Like, I'm going to go in a completely different direction, because what feels comfortable is to do the same thing that everyone else is doing, because you look at that as sort of the model for success. And I'm saying you got to go in the other direction. Like if you want to have a brand that looks like everyone else's brand, then we're the wrong place to come. Like, don't come to us for that, because we suck at that. Like we don't do well when you want a brand that looks like what everyone else is doing or what's expected. Like, that's not what we do. So you have to kind of be ready for that idea of disruption. You have to be able to be comfortable with it. And again, for everyone that's been on that ledge, that I say, hey, just let me do this. Trust me, it's gonna work. No one's ever come back afterward and say, I can't believe you talked me into it. Like, this has been awful. Like, it's just never happened, right? So, I feel like I've got a little bit of street cred after a couple of thousand home service brands that, maybe people trust me. But like I said, everyone that goes through it, like even like, we may have talked about it before, but like the story of Jason Bueller when we did his truck wrap and the size of his head, and he thought it was too big, and he's like, the head's too big, and I'm like, I mentioned in the book, I'm like, dude, the head is not too big. He's like, Dan, can we just make it a little smaller? And like, I had known Jason for a while, so I just said, dude, we're not changing the size of that fucking head. Like, just leave that alone. And of course, like, sort of the rest is history, right? I mean, he's 4x revenue in like 3 years, but while spending less than 4% of revenue. So like, you know, he was one of those guys too, where everyone was saying, oh my God, like, dude, that head is so big on the side of your truck. Like, why would you do that? And like, I had to basically convince him of it. And of course, like now everyone recognizes that brand in that community, and the size of the head played a big role in that. That's why I did it. Right. So, you know, you do have to talk people off ledges sometimes, and you have to help them understand the vision. But oftentimes some of the weakest brands that I would say we've done are for bigger companies where they want to involve a group of people and everyone wants to have their fingerprint in some aspect of that brand. And then it just gets watered down to being like sort of what everyone else expects it to look like. So like we've done some really, really killer creatives for some really big companies. And those have been some of the most challenging experiences that I've gone through, because, you know, it's Bob from accounting says, do this. And Sarah from HR thinks we should try this. And you're just like, oh my God, like guys, like Bob from accounting, like he's a stand-up guy. Like I love Bob, but like, I don't talk numbers to Bob, like don't talk branding. Like, so it's frustrating sometimes too, when you have to, you know, really try to appease like all these different parties. And then it really just gets watered down. It's really not as creative as it should be. Like we did one for a huge company, probably 100 million. And if you had seen the creative and then what we wound up with, you would be sort of dumbfounded, like, well, I don't understand. Like what you guys had was like so awesome. And they sort of reverted back to that safe space. In the end, they were super happy and they loved it and they think it's great. But I knew the missed opportunity that just occurred. And I did the best to sell it and I couldn't sell it. It happens sometimes, but the bigger the company, typically the more watered down the creative can become, unless somebody at that company is going to say, I am in charge of this. And I don't care what everyone else here thinks or says about this, because, you know, I'm going to trust the guy that I hired for this, if that makes sense.
Right. So how do you get that buy-in then from that team? Because this is something that I think anyone who is in sales, whether it's someone in a house trying to sell an air conditioner, whether it's an owner trying to get his team's buy-in on a rebrand or anything that they're trying to do at a company, how is it that you can go about coaching that one person to be out there to bang the table for this decision and say, I'm taking charge on this and this is the direction that we're going to go, and get people to buy into that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing like that you guys probably hear often as far as the sales process when an HVAC company is trying to sell someone. Like they want all the parties there. Like they want the husband and the wife there at the same time so that they can explain it to them, right? So that's sometimes the challenge when we pitch creative is I'll pitch it to not all the decision makers, which is like we really try to never have that happen, but sometimes it happens. Like they can't be there, so then they're not privy to the whole conversation about the whys. So that becomes like a problem in itself, because all they do is get a PDF and they open it up and they form opinions on that without knowing the context behind the decisions that went into making those concepts. So, you know, a lot of times we just have so much data. We have so many examples of similar strategies in similar markets and what's happened to them. And sometimes I will, you know, honestly enlist the help of somebody like a Jason Bueller. And just say, Jason, do me a favor, like talk to this guy. This is where we're at. He's really struggling with it. I know you went through this. He's a little bit concerned, or she's a little bit concerned, you know, and help them through that process, because it's not unique. It's not like every single thing we pitch, the owners say, oh my God, this is the one. Like it doesn't really happen that way as often as you might think it does. Like we have stuff like that happen, but it takes a while to get used to the idea of what we're proposing, because you've been living with the old brand forever. And I'm coming in and saying, hey, it's got to look like this now. And you may have had that for like 5 years, 10 years, like whatever the number is. And now you've got to sort of live with that idea for a little while. And that takes a little bit of getting used to. Like, I respect that. Like, I understand that. So.
No, it does dumbfound me a little bit that someone would invest as much as they would into a rebrand and then not take the advice of that professional.
It's a little weird, right? It's a little bit.
a little bit.
Pride, maybe
especially
a little bit of prideful, like, or they're a little bit maybe of a control freak. That's the only two things that I can think of that come to mind, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's a pride and ego thing, 100%.
Yes,
Certainly, yeah. I mean, ego can play a role, but it's like you think about the people that you do hire and that you do trust. Like, I'm not going to tell my accountant how to do my taxes. Like,
Right.
I can add.
Mhm.
It doesn't make me an expert in accounting, though. So at a certain point, like, you do have to trust the people that you've hired. I think my credentials are pretty good. So I'm sometimes surprised.
they're all right. They're all right.
But I think also too, like, they are scared, they are worried, and I respect that, and I'm not trying to force something on something, and even maybe sometimes we didn't hit it properly the first go around, but if I feel strongly about a concept, I'm gonna fight back. I had a conversation this morning with a client, and we had done a mascot, and he wanted to change, and he wanted to change to make the mascot look more generic, because we did something to this mascot that was unique. And I pushed back, like, and him and I have known each other for 15 years. So I could be a little bit more open with that conversation. But I'm like, dude, like, why? Like, he sends me a Google link to this particular style of mascot. And he's like, see, they all don't have what you added. I don't want to, if I say it, it'll give away, but I'm just going to say, I'm like, dude, you just sent me a screenshot of this generic idea. The reason why we didn't do that is because I don't want it to look like everything you just Googled. So, like, that part of it, like, he's like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense, because, like, yeah, yours looks a little bit different. I'm like, it looks a lot different. And if I made it look generic, then we can't own it. So, it was a mascot that involved a fruit. That's what I'll say. And so
Pineapples.
he wanted it to look exactly like the way when you type in this fruit name, it shows up on Google. And I said, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's generic. So, even there's a story in the book about a mascot we designed where the guy said the nose was too big. And I said, well, does it stick out to you? He's like, well, yeah, like, it looks like it's too big. I'm like, well, that's why we're going to keep it. Well, I don't understand. He goes, well, you just pointed out something that was unique and memorable about that particular mascot. I can make him look generic, but what point would that serve? So, like, you have to have them get used to that idea that, it shouldn't look like what you expect it to look like. That's the whole beauty of disruption and doing that part right. So that takes, some people are like, oh my God, like, you exaggerated that feature too much. I'm like, well, that was intentional. Like, that's not random. Like, we just suddenly decide to do that. Like, we've put a lot of thought into why we did that.
100%. Well, and if anyone really wants to see, like, what the thought process is behind how Dan and his team do these designs, there's a video on YouTube where you walk through Cool Air, I think it is.
Yeah.
Down in Arizona. Yeah. And like, literally from the artwork and the sketches right through to the final logo and the details of the wrench, that was the part that fascinated me, and why you were having the wrench in one place versus the other, and how it was going to interfere with the logo, and wanting the mascot to be able to be separate from the logo if necessary, the logo to be separate from the mascot if necessary, having the two together, and just the thought process behind all of it. It's a phenomenal peek behind the curtain, and how Dan and his team think through this process. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that's the part that you have to understand, is that how adaptable is that brand to different environments. Right. So, is the design too vertical? Is it too horizontal? Will it not function well on the truck? Can I split the elements? I know the brand you're talking about, where we had to split the elements so that I could maximize the canvas on that particular truck. So those are all things that, as we're designing, we have to have a solution for. Like, I have to know how well this is going to work on the back of your truck as well as the side of your truck. So I may have a vertical presentation of your brand on the back of your truck, and obviously a more horizontal presentation on the side of your truck. But it's like a puzzle. Like, all those pieces, you've got to have a plan for on where they're going to live in all these different environments. And that's why, again, too, people have stuff designed, and it was never meant to be on the side of a truck. It was never meant to be, embroidered or on the top of a website. Like, it was only meant for one very specific application, and maybe it works beautifully there, but it doesn't work on these other environments.
Right. Well, I think that's what's really unique about your background and going from lettering to advertising and being able to understand both worlds. The flexibility that you have with your designs to be able to put it on all these different mediums, whether it's web and social, to truck wraps, to billboards, to newspapers, doing the black and white and grayscale tests with everything. It's the thought process is just so detailed. It's incredible to get that peek behind the curtains. And then with the book too, now you're getting a peek behind the curtains into how they go through this whole process step by step. It's cool. And if you flip the questions a little bit, in a lot of cases, instead of it being Dan questioning you on whether or not your name passes his tests, it can be, how can you create the name that will pass his tests, by simply flipping those questions a little bit. And it's a workbook all of a sudden, right? And that's the part that's really cool. And it walks you right through A to Z, whether or not you want to fit in or stand out. And it's really quite remarkable. One question I do have, when it comes to the owners that are ready to go through a rebrand, what's the psychology that's in their head when they're ready to make that decision? Who is that owner? What process are they in? What position are they stuck in? What are the psychographics of kind of your ideal client, essentially?
I think you could sum them up just by saying that the majority of them are people that are just not satisfied with status quo,
right?
And they understand the limitations of what they're currently working with, and they better understand the limitations. And I think certainly, the different Facebook groups have really drawn a lot more attention to branding, the successes of some of the companies that they look up to, and sort of the blueprint that they've followed. So you could look at, certainly the Rebrand being part of it, the right CRM, like maybe they're using Sierra or CRM that's really functioning well. They have their processes dialed in. They have their sales process dialed in. So there seems to be like a very specific blueprint to follow. And a lot of guys realize that piece of their plan isn't actually working right. So they're ready for that change. They sort of embrace that change. And those are the guys that are also typically very quick to make decisions. Mm-hmm. They don't rely on the input of a lot of other people to make those. Like even when Victor and I rebranded for Absolute, I mean, I would say that decision-making process was done within 24 to 48 hours. And it was literally him and I going back and forth on Facebook Messenger as I was sketching it, and, got it dialed in, a sketch, like a rough on it. And then he was like, yeah, that's the one. And it wasn't like, let me go ask this guy, let me post it to my friends. It was literally like he knew exactly that was the right way to go, and he didn't need a lot of other input from it. So sometimes I think too, that's, not that it's a bad sign of a leader if they need to get feedback from every single person, but they need to own that decision. Right. A lot of times I do think it's just people who say, what we're doing today is not good enough for tomorrow. And to me, those make the best clients because they're ready to embrace that as a change for them, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I mean, I know you mentioned Sarah in there, so we definitely have to mention our show is sponsored by Sarah Systems. Visit them at sarah.tech for the ultimate CRM system. The way they're growing, the way they're changing, it's truly phenomenal. And it brings the simplicity back into business and focusing on profits. And that's one of my favorite things about their system is it's truly the nuts and bolts that you need to run your back end so you can focus on the front end and your people.
And it's disruptive.
Very disruptive.
Yeah. We're actually working with Billy on rebranding his company. So nice. I'm excited to work on that for Billy. I think that's a great company that he has there, and I'm excited because I love his name, and I think we could do something really cool with it. So I'm super excited actually to work on that brand. I think
is there going to be a goat? Is there going to be a goat involved with that? Because whenever I think about Billy Goat, I think about goats. So
yeah, I can't spoil it, but there will be something with a significant more amount of impact when we get through with it. He is coming up. I actually think he's coming up soon. He might be Well, maybe it's not that soon. It might be like December. I think he's sort of in line for it, but I'm excited to work on that one for sure.
So
I'm curious if there's any.
Even
Go
great
ahead.
people like Billy Stevens can't even jump the queue.
No, definitely not. I'm curious if there's any brands. You don't need to mention a specific brand, of course, but if there's any brands that you wish you could redo, or elements of those brands that you wish you could redo based on what your team is capable of now, and even the idea that now you have more people in the office to bounce ideas off of, to be able to truly come up with something remarkable, whereas before it was just you and it was your input and you had the final say on what was going out. I'm just curious if there's anything that you wish you could have done differently 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. I thought the question was, are there any brands out there now that I wish I could rebrand?
Well, I mean, that could go that route too.
That could be part of it too.
I thought that's where he was going at first too, and then he talked about,
but that are out
like,
there.
all right, going back 10 years.
There are a few that I would love to rebrand, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, when I look at our body of work, even going back 10 years, sometimes there's aspects of maybe the way the truck was done,
right?
Maybe the way the lockup of the logo was done that I think today I might have done slightly different. But I don't look at much of that work and say it's not doing the job, or it hasn't stood the test of time.
Right.
I think if I go back probably 15 to 20 years, I would say there's stuff there that, I would probably approach much differently today. I think also, there used to be, I think, a lot more when we were designing logos where we thought that the target audience was the actual owner. And so we were designing for what they liked and what they wanted to see. And certainly over the last, decade or so, we've really kind of shifted that approach. I want you to love your logo. Okay. I do, but my objective is not necessarily to design a logo that you love specifically. I'm more interested in who that target audience is, and and that target audience is typically, I'm going to stereotype and say Mrs. Jones, and she's 45 to 55 years old. And that's the sweet spot of where I'm trying to make sure the brand appeals to. And so we're much more cognizant of that. I mean, there's a whole section in the book on consumer psychology, talking about the psychology of home service brands and how they need to appeal to that specific audience. I think if you think about, like, imagine this too, like in the idea of disruption and branding, but if you think about what goes into the packaging of consumer products, like you're in a supermarket and you're going down the aisle, what if every one of those cereal boxes were red, white, and blue and had a snowflake in the sun? Why would you pick one over the other? And then suddenly there was a purple one. Like, so you would have something in there that, and I talk about in the book, that would be considered to be an aisle violator, right? Because it would suddenly catch your eye. But people don't understand that you're not selling heating and air conditioning. Like, you're selling service. You're selling, this idea of home comfort. And so how do we package that into something that a consumer will appreciate? And so, like, branding is almost like cereal box packaging to a certain extent, if you look at it from that perspective. And it's like, you think about how much money is invested in packaging, but yet when you think about home services, it's one of the things that not many people do invest. They don't invest in the packaging, which is the perception of their company. The other question, like, there's a lot of bigger private equity owned companies that I would love to rebrand. But I look at that space of private equity and the companies that are acquired under private equity, and I see opportunity for the people that are competing against those larger companies, and the opportunity revolves around the idea of building a better brand in them. And you could say, well, they're huge. How can you ever expect to build a better brand? But the reality is so many of these larger companies really actually have poor brands. Right. They spend a lot of money on advertising, and they've gotten so big that, they have a presence and they think it's working, and they don't want to change it, because now you have investors making decisions about the cost to rebrand, and they're all scared of that. They're all getting their, 15%, 20% returns. Everybody's happy. Nobody wants to rock the boat, but that's complacency. So that's fine. Let them be complacent. And then we're just going to come in and just start taking pieces of that, because we can do something that will compete with them. We can build a brand that will be more memorable than if you asked the biggest home service companies today and said, what is your brand story? How many of them do you think have a legitimate brand story? And I'm going to call out Gettle as one of the few huge companies in the home service space that has a legitimate brand story. But who besides Gettle can you identify and say, I know what the brand story of this company is. I know what their brand promise is. You know, what is it? Like 100% guaranteed? That's what your brand story is? You know, service today, that's the brand story?
Right.
So like there's opportunity there because there isn't a unique story that's being told by some of these larger companies. So how can you leverage that complacency for your own home service business that goes up against them? What can you do that's different, that's going to really speak to them, speak to the consumer that you're trying to reach? They're trying to reach them with a shotgun approach. They were just going to keep banging billboards and radio spots, and that's how we're going to try to do it. But there isn't anything compelling about those billboards or those stories that are being told. You know, $99, you know, drain cleanouts. Okay. That's the story. Is that what who am I attracting with that story? Right. So there's opportunities there. It's surprising how poor some of the larger private equity owned home service brands are. It's surprising. But you know, when Ken sold Goodrich, you know, that piece of that acquisition was a huge asset. You know, and I think that's the other part too, when people think about the investment in branding, it's not really a cost, it's an investment, right? And then when it comes time to sell that company, obviously the stronger the brand, the more money the business is worth. Now I know there's people are like, oh, it just goes by numbers and that's all they care about is numbers. And I get it, but I mean, I've seen some of the materials that are prepared for the sale of some of these companies that we've branded. And I know what goes into those documents as far as highlighting the intellectual worth, the intellectual property and what that property is worth for those particular companies. So, so yeah, I mean, there's a few, I won't name any names, but there's definitely a few that we could do wonders with for sure. But hey, it's fine. I don't mind if they're smaller guys just trying to take pieces of the bigger guys. That's fine with me too. So
well, and I'm curious too, who is your team's favorite to work with? Is it the brand new business that doesn't even have a name yet? You get full creative say to just go buck wild? Is it the business like Victor's where they've established themselves, they've made a good amount of money, they're growing like fast, rapid rate, but they want to get to that next level, but there's a little bit of resistance there? Or is it the company that's been around for 100 years? You know, I was talking to a company yesterday, they've been around for 96 years, where there's a true story behind that brand that can really be told better with proper brand alignment, brand story, etc.
I think that, I mean, startups are always fun because you're building from scratch. There's no baggage.
Right.
But I think also though, when you work with someone like Victor, for example, who was running a successful business, he just didn't look like a successful business. So I think that that's the part where I love, where I know a guy has all the processes dialed in. He's using best practices. He's got software like Sarah or something running his CRM. He's got all the right tools in place. Just the brand piece is the part that is not working right. So if I can solve that problem for him, you know, then I know he's going to kill it. Like he's already doing really well with what he's got. Sometimes it's amazing to me. And I'm like, dude, like you're doing 10 million with this. Like we can kill it with better branding. Right. So I think like those are the guys that are exciting to me, because I can't solve a organizational problem for your company. Right. I can't solve operational problems for your company. And I always tell my clients too, you better be ready for what's going to happen after we do this. Because that's the other thing I don't want to have happen is you start blowing up and you can't handle the growth. And then it starts tarnishing this brand that we just worked so hard to build, because either you grew too fast, you weren't ready for the growth. You know, so I sort of say it half jokingly to clients, but I'm like, you ready for this, right? You better be ready for what's going to happen after this, because like I joke, I'm like, I'm not responsible at that point. Like, you're on your own. Like you got to figure out that part. Like, so I think, again, if they have their processes, their systems, all that stuff dialed in, then it's just like torching the thing. It's like really giving that really big boost to help them get to the next level. So those are good for sure.
I love it. One last thought, because I mentioned it right at the beginning of the show, and I wanted you to speak to it really quick. Culture. The culture at KickCharge seems to be second to none in terms of the agency space. I love that your team is playing Flip Cup outside. You're recording it, throwing it on social. But truly, to work in that environment where you can elevate the performance of everyone else within the environment based on the team and the ability to work together. I just wanted you to speak really quickly to the culture that exists at KickCharge, how you created it, how you cultivate that and continue to grow it.
Yeah, I think the smartest thing I've been able to do here is just hire people that are a lot smarter than me. So I'm not afraid to surround myself with people who are a lot smarter than me, who are more talented than me. I mean, you may find this frightening, but I can't draw very well. I'm not an illustrator. That's why I hired an illustrator who does draw really well. I'm really good with type and typography and that type of stuff for sure. But I can't draw very well. And so I knew early on I needed to get an illustrator, like if I wanted to go to where I wanted to go. But I've surrounded myself and built a team that is really vested in the success of our clients. They share in the success stories. Like when I'll get a text from someone just talking about how well they're doing, that gets shared with the team in the group Slack. And when they post their first truck that gets done, like that gets shared, and everyone's like super energized by that. And this is a team that, again, some of them came from big agency environments that felt like none of the work made a difference. They weren't making an impact in people's lives. So, just to surround myself with such people that elevate each other. And they're all just so passionate about what we're doing. And they just see how we've been able to affect change in a positive way for our clients. And that's pretty cool. Like that's, some agencies, and we're not a sweatshop in the sense that most agencies are, in terms of like, no one's usually here after, 5:30 and no one's coming in, before 8:30. We don't really operate that way. Like I know I put in a decent amount of hours and stuff, but we try to respect that balance, of course. And some people came from a sweatshop environment in terms of an agency world where, if the stuff wasn't done, like you didn't leave until it was done. Like, and we don't really operate like that. And I also don't do things here anymore that I'm not good at. So that was certainly something that I had to experience after my heart surgery, because I couldn't physically be responsible for some of these other things. But I have an operations manager that basically runs the agency. I have an HR person that runs all the HR and the payroll stuff. So I'm not engaged in stuff that, quite frankly, I suck at. So just recognizing the fact of the things that I did suck at, I hired people who were really good at those tasks. And I also allowed them to do those tasks. And I think that was the part, like I had an operations manager, but I was still sort of getting in her space when I shouldn't have been. And when I was forced to not do that, was actually really one of the best things, because I got to see her flourish. I got to see how well this place ran, really almost 100% without me, which was amazing. So you build a team that elevates the company, that doesn't require you to really, run things, and will function beautifully without you. And I think that's the ultimate goal for any entrepreneur, right? Is to get to a point where you have a team that can do things and have been trained and know how to do things. And even the illustrators that work for me, we have 5 full-time brand designers now on staff. And we have like 5 graphic designers on staff, but that whole team has just gone through the process and really know exactly how to do this. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times they present concepts to me that I don't really have to do anything to. I don't have to say, go back, change this, make this bigger, make this smaller. Like, it comes to me and it's exactly, sort of what we want, and they know how to do it. And that's like the greatest thing in the world for me when I get concepts from them and I'm like, perfect. Like, let's present it tomorrow. Like, I don't have to really do anything. And that's the ultimate, right? To have a team that can really do that work in your absence and have it reflect on the standards that KickCharge represents.
Right. Train somebody to be better than you are is like when you can do that, now you've really leveraged. And I think that goes back to an ego thing. Some business owners and some entrepreneurs and some leaders don't want people that are better than them, where you can set that aside and you can grow a good business. One thing that I was just having a conversation with somebody, she's a director of operations in another agency. And we were talking about playing within your strengths, and specifically the Gallup's Clifton Strengths Assessment and what we were talking about. But the whole concept is saying, okay, well, here's your top 10 strengths. Play within your strengths. Don't focus on your weaknesses, because when you can focus on your strengths, you actually live a better life of fulfillment. It's not to say that you don't ignore your weaknesses. You have to know them so you don't get brought down into something that you're not going to be focusing on to be able to better your business and better yourself. So I'm glad that you had that. So as we wrap up, I guess before we get to the last question, we haven't plugged you yet. So I do want to make sure that if anybody wants to get on the ever-growing waitlist at kickcharge.com is where you can reach out to them, or you want to hit up Dan at kickcharge.com is his email. Check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/KickCharge Creative. And the other one is Instagram.com/KickCharge Creative. Of course, these will be in the show notes in case I talked too fast for you. So, Dan, as we wrap up, we have one last question. And that is, what is one question you wished people would ask you more, but don't?
Oh man, now you got me stumped here.
That's my goal for every guest when they're on the show, is ask one question that stumps them.
One question that I wish more people asked. I don't know. What is my I would say this. Okay, so what is my biggest regret? And it kind of goes back to the experience with the heart. So my biggest regret, I would say, is not doing some of the things in my life earlier that I felt like I needed to hold off doing for some particular reason. So living a little bit more in the moment and recognizing that tomorrow is not promised to anyone. And so if you talk about regret in that manner, the idea is to really live your life without having any regrets, if that makes sense.
100% sense. One of my that resonates, especially true with me. One of the things is that people never say on their deathbed, "Gee, I wish I spent more time at the office." Right? Their biggest regret is, "I wish I spent more time with my family." It's funny. Somebody asked my wife this. She's about ready to go back to work tomorrow after her mat leave, and they're like, "Well, what did you enjoy most about the summer?" She's like, "Spending time together as a family." And like just to be able to have that, that's something that I think a lot of people don't take for granted, is the ability to be able to do those things in life that are you just take it for granted, right? So
yeah.
Now, curious in that, Evan, I don't know if that's your mic in the background, but as I'm getting some static echo, maybe it's my end. But when you went through that whole process, what changed in your personal life? Was there something that you're like, okay, I don't need to work as long hours. My team is there. I'm going to spend more time with my family. Yeah. Was there something else completely different?
No, I mean, certainly that aspect changed a lot. And when they went into the OR and they saw you in half, and tell you before that, make sure you got your affairs in order and that kind of stuff. You're just like, oh shit, man, this is legit. Like this is real. Like this is happening. And so one of the really positive things that also came about it is I came home from the hospital and I was basically laid up and watching all these home renovation shows and these beachfront renovation shows. And my wife would be watching it with me. And then like after watching it for like a week and a half, I was just like, I said to her, like, why don't we get a beach house or a shore house? And she's like, well, like, we can't, it's too much money. It's expensive. Like, how are we going to do that? And then like literally a week later, or what, actually it was more than a week later because I was still laid up, but like a month later, I met with a realtor and bought a piece of property on the shore of Delaware. And that was like a direct result of going through that experience, because I had it in my head that you can't do something like that until X happens, until you have this thing happen. And it was always this thing down the road that I was waiting supposedly for it to happen, when in reality, there wasn't a reason why I couldn't do it right this moment. But it always was like never the right moment to do it. And it's so funny, like before I got on the show, my builder literally texted me pictures of the pilings that are going to hold up the house, because it has to be above the beach. But like it's happening, and like that is a really great thing, because it just means more time with the family, more time for us to enjoy this particular house that we're building down there. It's like a few hours away, and it'll just be a great retreat for all of us to really kind of disconnect. But I don't go through that first really awful experience, I don't come out like and suddenly decide to probably do this. I'm still probably saying, well, I have to wait to do that, So I'm not saying obviously you do things that are not prudent financially, but like to your point, like no one has a Brinks truck following them to the funeral parlor either. So you're not going to
take it with you.
So, again, like that experience was helpful, because, it just made me appreciate, the things that I have, and then the things that I think would be beneficial for my own family to experience. And so, and again, like even being able to go there if I'm going to go there for 4 or 5 day weekends, like all through the summer, like I know that the team here is doing what they need to. So like, I don't need to be, saddled to this particular office every day, because everything's happening. Like it doesn't require me to be involved to that level of minutia as it used to be.
Well, and here's the benefit that of making that move earlier than what you wanted is you actually get to, and you mentioned, taking time away and disconnecting. Right. And I've been a huge advocate for this for such a long time. And I don't think enough people actually do it. But when you disconnect and you take that time away and you go somewhere else and you get out of your day-to-day grind and you reset, that's going to actually keep you doing what you do longer. Yeah. Because you're engaged. You're not going to burn out. And people say, well, I'll never burn out. Well, yeah, burnout's real, right? Keep doing everything that you're doing all day, every day, and you're going to burn out. And so when you have this reset, now you can keep doing your passion even longer, because you're still fresh with it. It's still a passion. It's not, oh shit, I got to go to work today. It's like, no, you're excited because you've been disconnected for such a long time. You can't wait to get back.
Yeah. 100%.
Yep.
Amazing. Dan, thank you so much, my friend. I will leave everyone with the final quote that is in your book, which is, at the end of the day, you have 2 choices: to fit in or stand out, to bland or brand. Choose wisely. You are making a massive impact on this industry. You and your team are doing phenomenal work. You're changing lives every day. You're changing businesses every day, and you're allowing businesses to leave a legacy within their communities. So thank you for all that you and your team do. Thank you for choosing to brand yourselves effectively and go through that rebranding process yourself, so that you truly can feel what it is that a client goes through. So thank you, my friend, for leading from the front.
Thanks, buddy. Good seeing you guys as always.
Cheers.
Take care, guys.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed. Before you go, 2 quick things. First off, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. The other thing, if you took one tiny bit of information out of this show, no matter how big, no matter how small, All we ask is for you to introduce this to one person in your contacts list. That's it. That's all. One person. So they too can unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Until next time, cheers.